The most common piece of advice given for poor leg circulation after 60 is the one thing that might be quietly holding your recovery back. Walk more. That is what almost everyone hears, and walking is good for you. So let me be clear about that from the very first sentence, because you should keep doing it. But there is one specific action that actually drives blood out of your lower legs and back up toward your heart, and ordinary walking barely switches it on. I'm Dr. Robert Lawson, 15 years of internal medicine, and I have sat across from a lot of people who did everything they were told. They walked every morning. They propped their feet up on the arm of the couch at night. They wore the compression socks a doctor handed them in a hurry between two other patients, and they still came into my office with cold feet, ankles that puffed up by supper time, and that unsteady lurch when they stood up too fast. They were doing the work. The needle was not moving, and nobody had ever sat down and explained to them why. Here is why it matters at this age specifically. Poor circulation after 60 is not a small annoyance you learn to live around. When blood stops moving well through the legs, small cuts stop healing on schedule. They linger, they get infected, and in the worst cases, people lose a toe or a foot over it. It is also frequently one of the earliest signals that the arteries feeding the heart are under the same kind of strain, just further from the surface where you can feel it. By the 7th decade, something close to 1 in 5 adults has what we call peripheral artery disease, a narrowing of the arteries that supply the legs, and most of them have no idea it is sitting there. So stay with me for a few minutes, even if you are tempted to click away, thinking you already know this part. Walk more, prop your feet up, drink your water. I know. But the reason your feet are still cold by 9 at night has very little to do with your step count today. It comes down to one muscle that almost nobody ever thinks about, and once you know how to switch it on properly, the fix is far simpler than you would guess. Watch for the last one on this list, because it is the single movement vascular rehab programs lean on more than any other to get blood flowing again in an aging leg, and I am building up to it on purpose, so you actually understand what it is doing once we get there. Before we go any further, tell me in the comments how old you are and whether your ankles swell more by the evening or first thing in the morning. I read every one of these, and it genuinely shapes what I cover in the next video. Everything I am about to walk you through is one piece of a bigger picture, the small daily habits that quietly decide whether you are still moving easily at 80 or reaching for a cane at 65. I took what I tell my own patients about staying mobile and independent through these years and put it into one simple plan. It has already helped a good number of people over 60 get back some of the ease they thought they had lost for good. The link is sitting right there on your screen whenever you are ready for it. Now, the muscle I mentioned. Your calf. We call it the calf muscle pump, and plenty of people in my field call it your second heart, which is not a cute turn of phrase, it is closer to a literal job description. Every time your calf tightens, it squeezes the deep veins buried in your lower leg the way you would squeeze a tube of toothpaste from the bottom, and that squeeze physically forces blood upward against gravity, back toward your chest. Tiny one-way valves sit inside those veins like little trapdoors, snapping shut behind every push so the blood cannot slide back down the way it came. That is the whole pump, and it fires every single time you take a step, climb a stair, or rock up onto your toes. The trouble is what happens to that pump after 60. The vein walls lose some of their spring and get looser, so they stretch more than they should. The valves inside them start to leak just a little, letting blood slip backward instead of holding the line. And the calf muscle itself shrinks and weakens with the years, especially if you spend most of the day sitting, which is most of us, most days. So the pump slows down. When it slows, blood settles at the ankles instead of climbing. Swelling creeps in. The feet run cold because the skin down there is short on fresh, oxygen-rich blood. And here is the part that turns it into a spiral. The less you move, the weaker that pump gets, which makes moving feel harder, which means you move even less. A lot of people are somewhere on that slope without ever noticing they stepped onto it. Picture a garden hose lying flat across a long stretch of yard, with nothing pushing the water through it except gravity working against the slope. That is roughly what your leg veins are up against all day. Gravity constantly pulling blood down and pooling it at the lowest point, your ankle, while the heart sits up above trying to pull it back. The calf pump is the only thing standing between you and a hose that just sits there filling up at the bottom. It is not a passive tube. It is an active, working pump, and like any pump, it only runs when something asks it to contract. A chair does not ask it to contract. A recliner does not ask it to contract. Only movement does, and specifically, only movement that genuinely squeezes that muscle rather than merely shifting your weight from one foot to the other. The good news, and it is real good news, is that fixing this does not live or die on your daily step count. It comes down to a small handful of very specific movements that physically wring blood back up where it belongs. Every one of them works on the same lever, making that calf squeeze harder, longer, or more often than ordinary walking ever asks it to. That is the whole game, and your living room floor is one of the few places in this entire condition where you genuinely get a vote. Let's count down 5 movements, starting at 5 and building to the one I would choose above all the others. Number 5 is the ankle pump, and it looks almost too small to matter, which is exactly why people skip right past it. It is often the very first movement given to patients recovering from leg surgery before they are even cleared to stand, precisely because it keeps blood from pooling while healing happens. The mechanism is simple. When you flex your foot up and then point your toes down, the calf contracts and releases in that motion, and that alone squeezes the veins around the ankle and nudges along blood that has been sitting still. Research on early post-surgical mobility has repeatedly shown that this kind of gentle, repeated ankle motion measurably improves venous return and reduces lower leg swelling in older adults, with no standing and no walking required at all. The whole secret is doing it slowly, with control, and doing it often through the day. Here is how. Sit with your feet flat on the floor. Lift your toes up toward your shins while your heels stay planted. Then reverse it, press your toes down, and lift your heels the way you would gently ease onto a gas pedal. That full motion is 1 repetition. Aim for 20 to 30 of them, 2 or 3 times through the day. Do it while the coffee brews, while you watch the evening news, while you are on hold with the pharmacy. It costs you nothing but a few idle minutes you are already spending sitting down anyway. The mistake most people make here is rushing it, snapping the foot up and down quickly like they are tapping their foot to music. That barely engages the muscle. Slow and deliberate is what actually squeezes the vein. Ankle pumps wake the pump up. They do not train the bigger muscles higher up the leg. That is where we go next. Number 4 is the seated leg lift. And if you assume sitting down makes this an easy one, your thigh is going to argue with you about 10 seconds in. When you straighten one leg out in front of you and hold it, you fire the big muscle across the front of your thigh and the muscles at the front of your hip, the exact group you lean on to rise out of a chair, climb a flight of stairs, or catch yourself if your foot catches on a rug. When those muscles contract, they press against the large veins running up through the thigh and help drive blood the rest of the way out of the leg. This matters more than people assume, because geriatricians track something called gait speed, simply how fast a person walks, and they treat it almost like a 6th vital sign alongside pulse and blood pressure, because a slowing walk is one of the earliest tells that the body is quietly losing ground. Strengthening the muscles that carry you is a direct way to defend that ground. Here is how to do it. Sit tall in a sturdy chair, back pressed firmly against the seat, both feet flat on the floor. Slowly straighten one leg out in front of you, knee as straight as is comfortable, and hold it for 2 full seconds. Lower it back down slowly, without letting the foot just drop. That is 1 repetition. Do 10 to 15 on one side, then switch. The detail almost everyone misses is the back staying pinned to the chair, because that is what stops you from cheating with momentum, and cheating with momentum is exactly what lets the real muscle skip the work. Once it starts to feel easy, add a light ankle weight or a resistance band looped around the foot. Even a pound or 2 makes a genuine difference, and older muscle tends to respond faster than people expect, mostly because it has further to climb back from. This movement builds the strength that keeps you upright and moves blood through the upper leg in a way ankle pumps alone can never touch. But strong thighs will not protect you if your balance system is not doing its job, and that is exactly where the next one goes. Number 3 is the supported calf raise, and this is the one that trains circulation and balance in the very same motion, which matters because balance is quietly the thing that decides whether a person holds onto their independence or slowly loses it. The consensus among aging research groups is consistent on this point. Keeping the lower body strong is one of the most protective things a person can do to stay mobile, to keep rising from chairs and climbing stairs without needing a hand on the wall. Your calves sit right in the center of that picture. Every time they contract, they squeeze the deep veins and push blood upward against gravity. Weak calves mean blood pools, swelling climbs, and the reflexes that catch you mid-stumble get a little slower, which is exactly how an ordinary trip turns into an actual fall. Quick favor before I keep going, because this is a natural spot for it. If any of this has been useful so far, tap the like button. It helps this reach more people your age, and tell me down in the comments which of these 5 you are going to start with tonight. I read every one. All right, back to your calves. To do a supported calf raise, stand behind a sturdy chair or at the kitchen counter and rest your hands lightly on it for balance, feet about hip width apart. Rise slowly onto the balls of your feet, lifting the heels as high as is comfortable. At the top, pause for 2 or 3 seconds, eyes forward rather than down at your feet. Then lower yourself slowly, a full 3 seconds on the way down. That slow tempo and the pause at the top is where the actual work happens, because it forces the calf and the balance system to fire together, which is precisely what your body needs to do the instant you catch yourself mid-stumble. Start with 10, build toward 20 or 25 as it gets easier. Within a few weeks, this single movement improves ankle stability, circulation, and reaction time all at once, and it does it without pounding on the knees or hips. For a good number of the people I have worked with, this is the exercise that first made them feel steady on their own 2 feet again. But standing on 2 feet is the gentler version. The next movement takes one of them away. Number 2 is the single leg stance hold. And before you file this under balance and nothing to do with your blood, let me give you the number that made me take it seriously myself. In 2022, a study published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine followed more than 1,700 adults in their 50s through their 70s for close to 7 years, and found that the people who could not hold a simple one-legged stance for 10 seconds carried a risk of dying over that stretch that was roughly 80% higher than the people who could hold it comfortably. That is not a small difference. And here is the part that stops me every time I think about it. Among adults in their early 70s, fewer than half could pass that basic 10-second check on the first try. A brief balance test told researchers more about the years ahead than a lot of the numbers we typically chase on a lab report. You can actually try this right now, carefully, with a counter or a sturdy chair within arm's reach. Stand tall, one hand hovering near something to grab, lift 1 foot an inch or 2 off the floor, and see whether you can hold it steady for 10 seconds without needing to grab on. That is the test. It also happens to be the exercise. The reason it does so much for circulation comes down to time under tension. The moment you balance on one leg, the calf, ankle, hip, and core all have to contract and keep contracting to hold you upright. That sustained squeeze keeps the pump actively working the whole time, pushing blood up rather than letting it settle back into the foot. Ordinary walking never asks for that. You are on one foot for a fraction of a second, and then you are off it again. Standing on one leg forces the pump to stay switched on, and this is exactly where circulation and fall prevention overlap completely. When balance fades, people move less. When movement drops, blood flow slows, swelling rises, feet ache more, and confidence quietly drains away, which is the same spiral we opened with. To train it, stand beside a counter or wall, one hand resting lightly on it for safety. Shift your weight onto one leg and lift the other foot just an inch off the floor. No higher is needed. Stand tall, eyes forward, and resist the urge to curl your toes and grip the floor. Hold for 20 to 30 seconds, breathing normally, then switch legs. That is one set. Start with 2 rounds per side. As it gets easier, let your hand rest more and more lightly on the counter until eventually you can hover it just above the surface without touching at all. The longer, steadier squeeze keeps blood moving and retrains your nerves to react faster the next time you trip. But balance alone will not fully restore the flow. For that, you need the single strongest version of the calf pump there is, and that is number 1. Number 1 is the standing calf pump hold, the movement I promised you at the very start. Once you understand what it is doing inside the leg, you will see exactly why vascular rehabilitation programs around the world lean on it, almost the way they would lean on a prescription. It looks a lot like the calf raise from number 3, with one difference that changes everything: the hold. You rise onto the balls of your feet, and then you stay there. Your calves work as pressure pumps, and holding at the very top keeps that pump fully clenched long enough to actually clear the blood that has been stalling around the ankles and drive it upward toward the heart. Ankle pumps wake the system up. The single leg hold trains control. This movement moves the most blood of the 5, and it keeps it moving after the rep is technically over. The evidence behind supervised calf raise style exercise for people with genuinely narrowed leg arteries is not hand-waving. It is one of the more consistent findings in vascular medicine. Structured programs built around this kind of calf work have repeatedly been shown to meaningfully extend how fast someone can walk before leg pain sets in, often with no medication and no equipment involved at all. That is the calf pump doing precisely the job it was built to do. Here is how to do it safely. Stand behind a chair or at a counter, hands resting there for balance, feet about hip-width apart. Rise slowly onto the balls of your feet, heels as high as comfortable. Hold it for 3 to 5 seconds at the very top, breathing normally, eyes forward. Then lower yourself, slowly, about 3 seconds on the way down. That is 1 repetition. Start with 8 to 10. Work up over the following weeks to 15 or 20, always with control, never rushed. The hold is the entire point. That sustained squeeze keeps the pump fully engaged, drives blood upward, brings swelling down, and strengthens the exact muscles your body reaches for the instant you catch yourself. And because there is no jumping and no pounding anywhere in it, most people with arthritis or shaky balance can do this safely as long as one hand stays on that counter. Let me tell you about someone I will call Beatrice. She is a composite of patients I have cared for over the years, so no one's privacy is on the line here. Beatrice was 74, still driving herself to church on Sundays, still fiercely proud of her garden. But her feet were cold most nights, even in July, and by supper time her ankles looked like they belonged to someone else entirely. She had been walking a loyal mile most mornings for years, and she was quietly heartbroken that it never seemed to move the needle. I had her set the step count aside for a moment and instead do these 5 movements, in order, for about 12 minutes a day. Ankle pumps in her chair with her morning coffee. Seated leg lifts while the news played. Supported calf raises at the counter. The balance holds by the back door on her way out to the garden. The standing calf pump hold last, right before bed, holding onto her dresser. The first 2 weeks, she told me honestly, felt like nothing was happening at all, and she almost gave up on it more than once. I asked her to give it 1 more week before deciding anything, mostly because that early stretch is where nearly everyone quits, right before the pump starts responding. I want to be careful with my words here, because this is where people overpromise, and I never want to be one of them. Her circulation did not turn into a 30-year-old's. It was never going to, and I told her that plainly from the first visit. But within a handful of weeks, her ankles were not ballooning by dinner time anymore. Her feet were warmer at night, warm enough that she stopped reaching for a second pair of socks before bed, which sounds like a small thing until you have lived with cold feet every night for years. And the thing she told me mattered most to her was not any number on a chart. She stopped feeling like she might tip over when she stood up off the couch. She felt like herself again, steady enough to carry a full watering can across the yard without a second thought. And for a woman who had been quietly afraid of falling, that was the whole win. Here is the single thread running through all 5 of these movements, the one idea I most want you to walk away with. Every one of them works by making that calf squeeze harder, longer, or more often than a normal stroll ever demands of it. That is the whole secret sitting underneath this entire video, and once you see it, you will never look at a chair, a kitchen counter, or a few idle minutes of television the same way again. For years, you have probably been told that circulation, and the cold feet and swelling that come with poor circulation, are simply a readout of getting older, something that happens to you. It is more than that. It is also a lever. And this is one of the rare corners of aging where your own living room floor genuinely has fingerprints on the outcome. You did not cause this by being careless, and I want to say that plainly. Poor leg circulation after 60 is usually the slow sum of decades of sitting, of a pump that never got asked to work hard, not a personal failing. But the next 12 minutes of your day are yours to spend however you choose, and that part is squarely in your hands. And now the line I promise you in every one of these videos, because it matters more than anything else I have said today. There is a point where this stops being a living room matter and becomes a phone call matter. If you ever get sudden, severe pain in one leg, or a leg that turns pale, cold, and numb out of nowhere, or a sore on the foot or ankle that simply will not close up and heal, do not sit at home working through exercises. Call your doctor or get seen the same day. That combination can mean an artery is seriously blocked, and that is a genuine emergency, not a wait-and-see situation. Everything in this video is built for the slow, everyday, chronic kind of poor circulation, not for a sudden crisis like that one. So here is exactly what to do starting tonight. 5 simple steps. 1. Do 10 ankle pumps right now, in the chair you are sitting in, before you do anything else. 2. Pick just one of the other 4 movements to actually start with tonight, not all 4 at once, because the person who tries to overhaul everything by Friday usually ends up doing none of it by Sunday. 3. This week, learn the single leg stance test properly with your hand on a counter and see honestly whether you can hold 10 seconds. 4. If you spend long stretches of the day sitting, set a quiet reminder every hour to do 1 round of ankle pumps right where you are, no standing required. 5. And this ties everything together. Keep walking exactly as much as you already do, and keep taking any medication you have been prescribed exactly as directed. Never stop a medication because of something you heard in a video, mine included. These 5 movements are meant to sit alongside your current care, not replace any part of it. Now, moving well is one lever you hold. But there is another number most people over 60 have never once had checked. A simple comparison between the blood pressure in your arm and the blood pressure at your ankle, and it can flag narrowed leg arteries years before you ever feel a single symptom. In my next video, I will tell you what that test is called, how to ask for it by name, and what the results actually mean. I will see you there. Take good care of yourself, and take good care of those legs of yours. They have carried you this far, and with a few honest minutes a day, they will carry you a good while longer. I'm Dr. Robert Lawson.